Hey, what's going on? It's Stephen Platinum, and this is the first edition of Booking Breakdown, where I take a card based on something that I have read and I break it down. Keep in mind, the things I'm going to be sharing with you are things that I've really not shared with anybody, not in its entirety. I developed, for my qualifications, I developed my own booking system over the course of, my God, when did I start fantasy booking stuff? Probably when I was, oh boy, we're talking sixth or seventh grade. So I was 12. I'm going to be 49 on Tuesday. So you're talking 37 years of thinking about this idea of how to lay out matchups and other elements of a pro wrestling show in order to create sort of the greatest effect, long-term sustainability, and also helping the individual wrestlers and performers sort of reach their peak as well to create a great show experience, branding, all that kind of good stuff. Again, these are my opinions and these are my theories. Booking pro wrestling is not a science, right? It's not math. But I'm going to use a lot of numbers and I'm going to use a lot of things that are going to sound like definitive must do statements. My overall rule, most of all, is you can get away with just about anything as long as you do it well. That is a philosophy that I have about creativity in general. You can get away with almost everything. So all these guys who have all of these rules and they're constantly harping on the rules and you have to do it this way and mama, 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 mama. They're probably fucking wrong. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to make absolute statements here. I am, all the time. And you're welcome to call me out on them, or you're welcome to see them as they are. From all accounts, the Southern Honor 24 show went incredibly well and had some of the biggest pops that they've had in that building and all that kind of good stuff. I'm going to give my assessment at the end, but at times it's going to sound like what I'm doing is I'm just breaking down this show to nothing. That's part of the process in looking into these analysis. You're also going to get a lot of these theories of mine hard and fast. I'm going to try to put graphics up to sort of highlight them to help burn them in your brain. This is something that I plan on doing on a lot of shows, probably to the tune of at least one a week. I love all aspects of pro wrestling. I've done just about every aspect of pro wrestling. I say just about. I've done every aspect of pro wrestling. However, booking is a thing that is near and dear to my heart. I also feel that is something that is not being developed at any level of the game in an official capacity. And I'm going to contribute and I'm going to get that motherfucking ball rolling. So let's get it started. So the breakdown of, I'm going to be switching back and forth. So if you see me doing crazy stuff, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to make sure I'm accurate about things. I'm going to put the link below. That is Larry Goodman's report on Georgia wrestling history, news, and notes about the Southern Honor show if you want to follow along. Cool? Sweet. So I'm not going to look at Larry's, the top part of Larry, where Larry sort of gives general thoughts about the show. I might refer to a couple of things here. Here's the number one thing that I'm going to refer to, first of all. They drew 417. They did a great job promoting this show. The booker, Dylan, he was in the main event, so he had a vested interest in making sure that building was full and did it. The video packages leading up to this thing, I've looked at a couple of those things before on my channel, were top notch. And they were really great. Gary Lamb also got off of his ass and did some serious promoting for this one. And I saw that they were already promoting the next show. They already got up that great looking ridiculous flyer of the All-Star Special and all of that stuff. So their promoting is now in earnest. Whatever excuses they had for shows before, I don't give a fuck. When you're doing the proper job booking and the proper job promoting, and the boys are excited, it just comes across, right? Really important stuff. Okay, so right here, the breakdown of the show. You have 9 matches and 1 major segment. So I'm going to call it 10 things. Yep. That's too fucking many. That's too many for a show that's not a major show. I would allow that if this was a major show, but this was Southern Honor 24. So it's just another show. Now, that might sound patronizing, but what I mean by that is if you have a major show every 3 months or whatever, great. But this was not one of those. All right. Easy breakdown of stuff. Yeah. I call it the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule. Generally, on a regular card, you want to break it down like this. 1/3 of the things should be new things being introduced. 1/3 should be things, and of course, all this is rough, but just go with me. 1/3 are things that are continuing, and 1/3 are things that are ending. Okay? For each, once I lay out these rules, I'm going to go through this thing segment by segment, match by match, and say where they fall into these things. And then we will look at how accurate my standards are as far as determining how balanced the card is. Did they get the reactions that they wanted from everybody all night long? That kind of thing. That's one of my rules. Another one is different segments, especially matches, are going to be categorized one of three ways. They are either opening match / introductory things, and then you have two jobs with that. You got to get your gimmick. Everybody involved has to get their gimmick over and show that they can work. Their job is to not steal the show. Their job is to not do too much. Their job is to introduce themselves to the audience. Then there's anything that would be categorized as the mid card. The job of the mid card are twofold, right? This is the bulk of the card where we want to see wrestlers in conflict with each other. What we're just going to call feuds as a catch-all, but it's actually more complicated than that. But just for the simplicity's sake, the two jobs are get in feuds and elevate the action. Here's where better stuff happens, bigger stuff happens. And then, of course, the main event, of which there should only be one, though most wrestling cards are now taking to calling something a co-main event as well as having a main event. But your job of the main event are to create the hype and live up to the hype, right? Another set of rules. Do these things once or not at all, but never more than once. That sounds like an absolute rule. Here are the things that you should only do once a card. Have a big return. Somebody coming back who hasn't been there for a long time. Have a really screwy fuck finish. I'm not talking about interference or whatever. But while we're talking about it, you can have one match with interference. One match with a ref bump. And keep in mind, I'm not saying you have to do one. Most of the time you should do none. But if you're going to do it, you should only do it once. Ref bump. Fuck finish. Fight out on the floor for an extended period of time. Once. One swerve or turn. I put beyond reproach here. I'm going to have to remember what I thought of, what I meant by that. Huh. All right. Cool. Okay. Here's my first general note. How I think of wrestling, how I think of entertainment, how I think of sports in general. I call it the blind side rule. Blind Side. That movie, Sandra Bullock, about that family that adopts this big dude who comes from a very poor neighborhood. He's black. They're white. That movie, in structure, and if you look at that script without knowing anything else about it, that is a made-for-TV movie. That is not the kind of movie that usually would get theater play. Certainly wouldn't be a major studio release. Certainly wouldn't have been a big hit. But it was a hit. And the reason is they took this format that was basically a made-for-TV movie. You know, it's based on a true story. It's sort of like a slice of life piece. It's sort of an interesting novelty. But it made it all the way to the theaters. It made it to the big. I think Sandra Bullock even won an Oscar for the bitch, right? Because even though it had the made-for-TV movie soul, it was elevated through production. Like if you look at that movie, the editing, the writing, right? It looks like a major motion picture. And the level of talent. You got Sandra Bullock, right? You got Kathy Bates in a side role. Everything looked great. When they got college coaches to try to recruit the guy, they got Nick Saban. They got Lou Holtz. They got these people to really be in the movie. So they took this thing that at its soul and heart is a made-for-TV movie, and they elevated it through talent and production. Here's my thing about pro wrestling. Pro wrestling at heart is not a higher order art form. It is not. It was meant to be what it was meant to be. It's a thing from the carnival sideshow that has changed into what we see today. But at its heart, it's nothing more than a sideshow hustle. But through talent, and not just talent for the wrestlers wrestling, but the people producing, booking, all of that stuff, you can elevate. Through production levels, you can elevate. The WWE has shown this as well, right? How that show looks is what makes the WWE WWE. That's the truth. It's about production, and it's about being able to acquire the best talent. That's what separates the WWE from just being a sideshow, dingy, one ring and a few chairs act, which is at the heart of what pro wrestling is. So, yes, those factors matter. So never forget about the blindside factor. So because there's a number of promotions that aspire for more at the indie level, and they contact me all the time. But I have to tell you, what makes your thing that every wrestling show is at its heart a shit show. But the ones that up their thing through production and how it is run, and through the talent that they use, elevate themselves. Makes sense? And in that Southern Honor, their production is top notch for what it is. And the talent level they use is incredibly high. So they have successfully and quite easily shed the label of shit show. All right, let's break it down. Open the show. They don't open with some kind of promo thing. I think that's smart. I think that's good. We have Gunnar Miller against Chris Banks. I would categorize this as I would categorize this. We're really being kind of introduced to Chris Banks here, right? And this is an opening type of match and a squash match. Are we getting the gimmick over? And gimmick doesn't just mean for individual wrestlers. It can also mean the story that we're trying to tell, right? So we got Corey Hollis and Michael Judas observing the proceedings. So did we get this gimmick over of Lethal Poison is interested in recruiting Gunnar Miller? Yes. Did Gunnar Miller show that he could work? Absolutely, right? I can just read it here. Miller caught Banks as he attempted to fly from the top rope and hoisted him directly into the jackhammer. Solid opener that served its purpose. Yes, because the purpose is this story about Lethal Poison, showing that Gunnar Miller is dominant, and then Miller refusing to be recruited by them again. All works, all good. I would put this in the new-ish category. No, actually, it's a continuing thing because Lethal Poison has continued to this. So I'm wrong about that. So that puts them into the continue category. Good. So we got this segment. Actually, we can call it 11 segments. Oh boy, is that too much. Right? Oh Lord, that changes a lot of things. So we got David Ali, I'm glad they didn't open with this. I'm glad they opened with a match. So we got David Ali coming in the ring with Austin Towers. He's got Ravina with him on his back. Certainly a bigger production kind of level thing than you would normally see at an indie show. I think that's smart. Ali does his thing, trying to get everyone to say hallelujah. Daze comes to the ring in street clothes, and Ali kicks Vane in the head. Boy, does that set up your main event. Does this create the hype? Yes. All the production and all the hype leading to this show has really focused around David Ali. So this thing, it continues in that vein. This is obviously a continuing segment. Match number 2, Jordan Kingsley with Logan Chase and Kevin Ryan defeated Kyle Matthews. This one definitely goes into the continue category as we continue this thing between Logan Chase and his guys against Kyle Matthews and others. Works for me. Honor Society. They're going to beat down Matthews. Chip Day makes the save, segueing directly into the next match. So Chip Day beats Kevin Ryan with Logan Chase and Jordan Kingsley at ringside. Post-match, we have Matthews and Day. Now they're going to get their payback, but the Honor Society get out of there. Cool. All these are segments that are perfectly workable. One thing about the matches, they're the exact same time. So far, we've had 3 matches, and they're all 8 minutes long. Is that a problem? Not in and of itself, except for this. You're lulling the crowd into an expectation. They are going to feel the beats of the match if you continue to condition them in this way and have every match be the same length. So far, everything on this card has been about continuing. There's been nothing introduced, really, and there's been nothing concluded. All right, so now we got Petty Party, which I count as a major segment. We got Owen Knight as the guest. It's really good, apparently. And then AC Mack makes his surprise return. So that's our big return, right? Hopefully our only one. It's not. Lamb appears telling everyone to shut up. He ordered a 3-way match right now. Oh, that's what I mean about Beyond Reproach. You can do one thing a show where you have somebody exercise authority over the guys. But if you have more than one instance of that, then it's taking away. So that's Lamb's one. We'll see if there's any others. So then we get the surprise match, AC Mack against Owen Knight and Ashton Starr. 10.5 minutes here. AC Mack goes over. This is kind of a new thing that they're developing. So cool. We'll put it in the new category. So we had 2 major segments and 5 matches. So out of 11 things, 7 of them have happened before intermission. Whew. We go to intermission. We come back. We got All-Star Special, William Huckabee and Hold My Bear Hansen, and the Exotic Youth. This was the second longest match on the card. And it was new. And it was a squash match, right? Or it should have been. It should have been an introductory kind of match. But instead it was the second longest match on the card. Huge mistake, right? Because the point of this thing is, are we getting the gimmick over about All-Star Special? Yes. How long does that take? About 3 minutes. And did they show that they can work? Yes. Larry loved their finisher and their whole gimmick and their whole entrance. The whole thing should have been 3 minutes long tops, because that would have done something else that this card desperately needed, especially at this point in the card. They needed a palate cleanser. Steve, what is a palate cleanser? A palate cleanser is a match that happens where the segment goes much shorter than you were expecting. So the crowd resets and goes, instead of bracing for the long haul, which this whole card braced them for the long haul. 8-minute match, 8-minute match, 8-minute match, then a segment that probably went about 5 to 8 minutes, then a 10.5-minute match. Things got longer and longer and longer, and then we go to intermission, and then we have the longest match that we've had yet. Right when they came back from intermission refreshed, we suck it all out of them. And you can't do that. You need a palate cleanser match in there, so then you can reset, and then you can go to your stuff that's important. Is it bad if the stuff in the second half of the card is longer than in the first half? No, that's what it should be. But you help yourself by having very few segments after intermission. My basic format was 4 matches, maybe with a segment or 2 in there, before intermission, 2 afterwards, tops. That way, when people came back from intermission, whatever juice they had, they were ready. They were ready to spend it on the things I wanted them to pay the most attention to and give the most energy towards. I didn't abuse the crowd. Indie shows tend to abuse their crowd, and that's a problem. Yep. All right. At All-Star Special, obviously that's new as well. So far, almost everything has been a continuing thing, and a couple things have been new. Nothing has been concluded. Nothing has been finished. Next, Austin Towers against Sin Bodhi. This was an obvious attempt to rebuild Austin Towers after repeatedly losing in tables matches and getting put through tables and getting his ass whipped. So we're going to have him go over the name with his finisher. 12 minutes. Too fucking long. Too fucking long. And if we had a palate cleanser in here somewhere along the way, can you see how this would have helped this match? Yeah. Wouldn't have been the worst thing for Sin Bodhi to do something in the first half of the show, but it's not necessarily necessary. This was obviously a new thing. So now everything has been new. Most things have been continuing. So then we get a video of Matt Lynch laid out in the parking lot. Lamb says Lynch Mob were at the hospital and could not make it for their title match. Obviously, this is a segment that they just had to put together on the fly, because nothing about this rings that it's what they intended. Lethal Poison storms the ring. He's mad. Judas grabs Lamb. Chip Day and Kyle Matthews hit the ring. Lamb told Lethal Poison not to ever touch him again. So Lamb is flexing. So here's everybody that Lamb has flexed on this show. Ashton Starr, AC Mack, Owen Knight, telling them all to shut up. The most over heels that they have, Corey Hollis and Michael Judas. These are all the people that Lamb has flexed on without consequence. I don't know why Southern Honor persists in doing this. It's awfully hard to build up a heel when you're constantly reminding us that ultimately they have no authority and have no power. Southern Honor continues to do this, which is why their number one problem is heat. And they have to manufacture heat new with their heels every show. They had to do that segment with David Ali in the beginning where they kick a woman in the head. They have to do these things because at the end of the day, they're always one Gary Lamb promo or public outing where he reminds you that the heels ultimately only have power if Gary Lamb allows them to have it. And now Gary Lamb is talking down to their number one heel and their biggest heel and basically telling them, don't you ever touch me again. This match happens and it's 8 minutes long. Lethal Poison goes over. But again, you got to be understanding based on the things that they had to deal with. I get that. But this is one of those things that I'm sure just when you look at everything that happens after intermission, you have a match that went too long, Another match that went too long and sucked the energy out of the crowd. Then you have this match, which felt very, very ramshackle, as talented as the guys are doing this match. And you have Chip Day and Kyle Matthews, two of their mid-card babyfaces, losing again. And all of this is your setup for the main event. It's a problem. And all of these things are new and continuing. We haven't had one thing finish yet. Right? I guess presumably Chip Day and Kyle Matthews are going to have nothing to do with Corey Hollis and Michael Judas in the future, so you can maybe call that a finish of a thing. So Sunny Days against David Ali. That goes 17 minutes. That's appropriate. Right? David Ali, that's our one DQ finish. Okay. Then we have a return of Logan Creed. Creed lays him out, and that's how we end the show. Okay. So, by my count, we had 3 new things happen out of 11. 8 things that are continuing, and nothing wrapped itself up or finished. Why is that a problem? The reason it's a problem is if you constantly have shows that where nothing ever resolves itself, except for your big angles. So people are often worried about their big angles, and they don't care about wrapping up the mid-card things. They just sort of like fade back and forth. The problem with that is it's hard for a crowd to maintain its energy when nothing feels conclusive, when it feels like they're just in this state of perpetuity. Right? WWE on Raw has done this to their crowd repeatedly. Even at times where you thought, for example, Elias and Jeff Hardy, which are a mid-card feud, when you thought that thing was over, okay, they're doing this thing where they're hitting each other with a guitar and a pole. Okay, that's the end. No. Oh, now we're going to have a bunch of instruments everywhere, and then they're going to hit each other with that? Oh, this is the end. No. When you constantly don't finish things for your audience, the long-term effect is nothing feels important enough. And your main events begin to suffer because people just go like, well, fuck, I don't even know if this is going to be the end. You gotta wrap things up in definitive fashion, or things just feel like they are undone. And it's not a direct thing, it's a subtle feeling that you have about the show. Would it have been nice if there was a feeling of finality about some or all of these things? Or if at least a couple of them? Yes. Yes. So the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 thing hurt them here because the crowd completely ran out of steam. There's way too much stuff going on after intermission. The show, you could almost divide it in half. Yeah? And the intermission shouldn't take place with around half of the things happening after intermission. It should be 2/3 before, 1/3 after. And if you total up the time of the matches in the second half in particular, it's roughly half. And you don't want that. You want them to come back from intermission after a pit stop. That's what that is. And then they really have their energy to give for those final things. I would never do more than 3. I would be reluctant to do more than 2 matches after an intermission. And I certainly would never do 9 fucking matches on a card again for a regular card. It's just too many. Yes, you want to give people their money's worth. But look at it this way. On every episode of Dynamite, you know how many matches they do? I can tell you, 6. Every time. And the last 2 matches are a much bigger deal than the first 4. That's... unconsciously, they've come up with a good design for a show. It never feels like it goes too long. Yeah. Big returns, they did 2. Logan Creed's got the proper reaction that you want, as did AC Max. And again, you can get away with anything if you do it well. But in general, I would not do more than 1 big return a show. They only had one finish that could be categorized as kind of a screw finish for the DQ. But then the payoffs afterwards certainly erased that. They didn't do any swerves or turns, thank God. Lamb continually belittling the heels has to stop. They have to stop that. Because if Lamb gives an ultimatum to a heel and the heel listens, then he wins, they lose. We got to have more things wrap up on the next show. We got to have a couple things end so then guys can end their thing and then go their separate ways and begin other things. But this feeling that stuff never ends, it's too much. It's too much. The All-Star Special debut, that could have served as the palate cleanser. Imagine that thing. Okay, let's look at where they went to intermission here. AC Mack, Owen Knight, Ashton Starr. Okay, so you do that match. It's great. Then you do the debut of All-Star Special against Exotic Youth. You keep that match to 3 minutes. It's not only a big lift for the crowd because they're so into Waffle House, Huckabee, and Hold My Beer Hansen. It gives them a lift. It's a palate cleanser, so people are like, okay, cool. You're chopping 10 minutes off of your show, and you're going into intermission with all that momentum. Then you come back, and you only have 3 matches. You trim a little bit off of that Austin Towers Sin Bodhi match. You hit Lethal Poison against Chip Day and Kyle Matthews. And they're not at a low energy ebb. They're at a pretty good energy ebb. And instead of the second half running just rough math, almost more than an hour, now it's only running a little over 30 minutes, closer to 35. How do people feel at the end of that show now? They feel great. Cool. So that's my booking breakdown. Think about it this way. This show was incredibly successful. They made a new star. They made a new star in that tag team. That's like potentially super duper over. They now have this idea of Logan Creed teaming with Sunny Days against Ali and Towers. That's awesome. Yeah. They didn't use a bunch of tropes. They didn't have pull apart brawls. Like the one of the shows I went to, they had a ton of they had more than one pull apart brawl. That's one of those things that you can only do once a show tops. Right? This card did way more right than wrong. And with just a little bit of tweaking of moving things here and there and being really tight with our times and getting those things across, this card gets streamlined to the point where it's almost unrecognizable, where it goes from great to one of the best of the year, just with a couple of simple tweaks. Now, I will give, sort of on miscellaneous booking stuff, the fact that they had to deal with the Lynches not being there in what was likely going to be a title switch and had to adapt and use Chip Day and Kyle Matthews that many times, that was a good booking recovery. And you can do that kind of thing when you have talent like Chip Day, Kyle Matthews, Corey Hollis, and Michael Judas. They can make that thing work, right? So I'll give them credit for that. But I'm telling you, you stick to these... you at least use them as guideposts, a lot of the things that I'm talking about, and you will begin to see wrestling differently, and you will begin to see even how the big leagues can fix their stuff. Are they doing the same finishes multiple times? Right? Another thing is, if you have a gimmick match, you shouldn't have another gimmick match right next to it. And I count tag team matches as gimmick matches. Yeah? Because again, you're asking the crowd to do a different sort of mindset. Oh, this thing is more important. And if you keep just telling them everything we have is important, if everything is special, nothing is. You have to have ebbs and flows. Anyway, let me go ahead and get this thing up. Thanks for watching.